The first Descendant was known for a long time to have lackluster guns and options if you wanted to throw some serious lead downstream, with items like the Fallen Hope and Restored Relic really leading the pack in the way of terrible options. With last season's Battle Pass unlock of Excava being middling to say the least, there wasn't much hype around this season's weapon, especially once it was announced as a beam rifle. Now fortunately this isn't the case, as Voltia, or Voltia depending on how you pronounce it, is actually a fantastic gun, not just in the current seasonal content, but just in general for its insane mobbing qualities. So in this video we'll be looking at how the Voltia works, what things to consider when building it, and how to really achieve its perfected form. If you enjoy this type of content and want to see more gun guides down the line, have a check of that subscribe button. It really is the Christmas gift that keeps on giving. And with that out of the way, what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. Alright then, so let's start talking about the actual gun in of itself, because we need to talk about what it's able to do to be able to then kind of like suggest what we actually need to be able to build into. So the standard gun itself, if we swap over to the unique ability, you can see that I do have 1 out of 4, so keep in mind that this can massively improve once we actually get through the whole season pass and everything like that. The main kind of thing for this is that every 5 shots at 1 of 4, it will essentially do a chain kind of bolt that will essentially hit a bunch of enemies that are caught nearby. Now this does even more if you attack targets with shields, so if you're just applying to a standard enemy, this will only go up to 4, but if you are attacking someone with a shield around them, this will then do up to 6 targets, which is fantastic. This also does more firearm damage if you hit anyone that has any type of shield. So for example, in the current content, we have shields that can only be defeated with skills, as well as some that can only be defeated with guns. Well, the Voltia is very different in that case, because it's able to proc both of those, so you can just keep shooting. If you see a shield that's been procced, you can just use this gun and it will just get rid of it regardless of what color and what type it is, so which makes it really consistent. It's really fantastic for being able to take down those mobs, especially those stubborn ones as well. And then if you are just essentially dealing the damage to any enemies that don't have shields, you will then essentially just do 17.5% of your standard firearm damage. So the main kind of draw, obviously, when it comes to this, after everything we've just talked about, is 1, it's able to proc shields, but 2, it's able to take down multiple targets at the same time. So we really want to focus on the amount of damage that this gun can pretty much do, and because it's a beam rifle, we want to also keep it up, maintain it at its highest possible beam for as long as possible, because if we're able to do that, the more damage we're going to be chucking out. Fantastic. Looking at its information sheet, we can get an idea as to what we should be building into. Obviously, the firearm attack is a little bit on the low side, but we will be fixing that with modules. You can also see that I do have a roll into this gun to boost it up by 11.9%, hence why it's at 9.5k. It does have respectable fire rate, it's not too bad. The magazine is a decent size, which we will be improving upon because we want to be able to keep this gun up and as often as possible. And then the critical hit rate and the critical hit damage are just respectable. They're nothing like outstanding or anything like that, similar to like Enduring Legacy, but they're nowhere near as like 1% as like some shotguns do, or 5% as some Descendants have, so you could still reliably go into a critical hit build with this gun, but we will be explaining my current choices as to the way I've kind of like built around it. There are some Descendants that can pretty much kind of get around this, so then make it a little bit more consistent, but once again, that's a little bit later in the video. So swapping over to the modules, we essentially want to increase the amount of damage that we're going to be chucking out, and there are a number of ways that we can kind of do this. Now, obviously the main way that we're going to be doing this is going to be firearm attack, being able to go into rifling and reinforcement, as well as being able to go into action and reaction, is already going to give us a really good start of 93% increase to the amount of damage that the gun does as standard. Now, we do take this one step further because I am going to be putting on a charge amplification mod. Now, you will note that this will hurt our critical hit damage, to the point of that if we then swap over to this card, you can see we're now down to a 1x multiplier. It is a pretty decent gun to go into critical hits, but because the amount of damage that we will be getting from that 67% for the firearm attack is consistent, it made more sense for us to go into that. Now, we will be offsetting this, don't worry whatsoever, just because it says that it's a 1%. We will actually build semi into crit to be able to help this gun out, but I prefer the consistency of being able to increase my attack up to 22,000 as standard, and then being able to actually work from crits just if I manage to get them off on the off chance. Now, speaking of crit, let's actually go straight over into those modules. So we will be swapping into Better Insight and Better Concentration. The Better Concentration is going to offset the amount of damage that we are going to be losing with Charge Amplification, and then give us a boost to it. So, for example, you can see here, we're now getting up to close to 15% increase to our critical hit damage, and Better Insight, because of that 37%, is going to be giving us just over 5% increase to our critical hit rate, as you can see here. So now we've gone from 1 times up to 1.7 times. That makes it much much more respectable in terms of the amount of damage. So we will be getting some decent kind of like crits out if we do manage to proc it, and because of how often we will be firing the gun, because it's a beam rifle, it's fairly common that we're going to actually hit a crit every now and then, which is then going to spread to the enemies that are nearby. Now you will notice that we do have two of the cerulean mods that are pretty much slotted in here, and the main thing that I do think you should go for are going to be magazine mods for this. So in that case, expand weapon charge is going to be fantastic, compulsive magazine is also going to be great. It is going to be affecting our weak point damage, but because it's a beam rifle and because of how we kind of play with this gun, we're not really going to be actually using this to target specifically into weak points, so therefore it already has a 1x multiplier anyway, so there's really no harm for us to actually kind of go into this. So the more magazine size, the better in this case, and that does take us up to a respectable 78 as standard. And that's before we've got like components or anything else that kind of like factors into that or anything. So that leaves us with 3 mods, and you can kind of see the main kind of majority in terms of like what shaper we actually are going for. So if we swap over to the Xantic mods, you can probably get an idea as to what we go for. Now, the main kind of generic yellow mod that's really going to help beam rifles out is going to be Sharp Precision Shot. This one is going to initially hurt us in terms of fire rate, but then as we constantly hold down the trigger, which is how we power up a beam rifle, it's then going to get faster and then do more firearm attack, and that firearm attack is going to feed really nicely into all these numbers and then spread out to all the enemies nearby. So we kind of want to also increase the amount of damage as well, because the extra damage that we get from elements, especially in this season, is fantastic. It's really going to help us out in terms of like the amount of damage we can chuck out. So the main one that I've been going for is going to be Electric Enhancement. That's going to give us 30% of our firearm attack as electric damage, and then on top of that we've gone for one of the brand new mods, which is Electric Circulation. Now I will suggest a different mod in this slot just a second, but I wanted to talk about these brand new mods because this Electric Enhancement, it does go to spread to other enemies, which is fantastic. It's basically an increase of 30% the amount of damage that we will be chucking out. But this electric circulation allows us to essentially, if we manage to trigger electrocution, which can happen from the attribute status trigger rate, which is only a base 4%, but keep in mind that we will be hitting multiple enemies at the same time with electric enhancement, so it's 4% for every single enemy that we will be hitting. Essentially, if we trigger it once off an enemy, we're going to be getting up to 89.6% increase to our electric attack for 5 seconds, so that obviously increases the amount of that we're going to be getting from this. Now, the main reason why I've gone for electric with this gun is because I actually did manage to get a roll into my electric attack, as you can see here. So anything to really kind of complement it, essentially that's the electric enhancement or the circulation is going to work really nicely with the 30% that I'm getting from my module, but it's also going to be boosting up this electric attack as well, and it essentially just kind of double dips in that sense. I'm getting a bonus from my module as well as from my actual rolls into my gun. Now, if you don't get electric attack, feel free to be able to swap these out. I would highly recommend that you do match your element. In this case, if you did manage to get fire attack, swap this out for fire enhancement, and obviously chill, etc, etc. So try and get a roll when it comes to your gun, and then just match these two mods, because you can actually get every single mod to match the elements that you are going for. Now, in terms of like the kind of like change to this mod, electric circulation is probably my second choice when it comes to this slot. My first would actually be going to, if I go to access info and I go to my not owned slot, is actually going to be high voltage plasma. The reason why I want this one is because this gives me more consistency. Because of how the beam rifle works, I would essentially want to keep hitting the same target over and over and over and over, and by doing that I'm going to be increasing my electric attack just consistently. I don't have like a cooldown or anything like that I need to worry about, but on the same time it's going to be reducing targets defense, and that's really going to help us out when it comes to like bosses or any more like stubborn targets, so I can then do more damage because it goes off the firearm damage rather than firearm attack, and because I'm then doing more damage because I'm reducing their defense, it essentially spreads it out more. So I do think that high voltage plasma is going to be the best in slot. I just unfortunately haven't been able to get it to drop. So if you're like me and that's the case, then I would highly recommend that you do go for electric circulation just for the time being, and then once you've got that you've managed to get it and you've got it powered up, slot it into that slot right there. Now, we did briefly touch about the rolls when it comes to the beam rifle, but you can kind of see what I've pretty much gone for. It's essentially what I think is a god roll when it comes to this. Don't worry too much, there is one extra roll that you probably could add into here, and that's actually going to be rounds per magazine. I think anything that's outside of that is pretty much just a no-go for it, because you don't want Colossus damage, you don't want anything else. You could potentially argue and go for a specific type of enemy and all that kind of thing, but to be honest with you, I think this is probably the best generic kind of roll that you could go for. So that's going to be firearm attack, critical hit rate, critical hit damage, and then a roll into an element, and then that element is then matching to your mods that you do have when it comes to your module slots. Now we do have two more areas that we can talk about in this video to be able to really complement that Voltia rifle, and that's actually going to be the Inversion Reinforcement to begin with. There are a couple of mods that are absolutely fantastic in this if you do want to primarily rock the Voltia rather than actually rely on your skills. One of which is going to be in the season side. This is going to be photon stacking. If you hit 3 or more enemies with the Voltia, which it will be doing from its chain lightning, it essentially grants you photon stacking. This will increase your firearm attack by 12.8%, and it will also increase your charging speed of your beam rifle by 16%, so you get up to that max kind of rank faster, so you can do more damage and everything like that. So I do think that this is a fantastic thing for you to be able to go through. It's a bit unfortunate that it does have a 10-second kind of window where it's not giving you anything, but to be honest with you, it's still great, so that even at 50% uptime, still a good one to be able to go into, especially if you're primarily using that rifle. And then lastly is actually going to be anything in the attribute category. Now, you do want to be able to get this maxed out pretty much as soon as possible if you are primarily going into a firearm attack. The only downside is that typically I rolled electric, and electric is this one, which requires me to be able to have 3 more points to be able to get this unlocked. Now, it doesn't really matter, like I said, you don't specifically have to go for electric, you can go for any of the other elements, and they're much easier to be able to get unlocked. But obviously if you do manage to grab fire, you can go for this one. If you manage to grab chill, if you manage to grab toxic, etc, etc. The idea and the main draw behind all this is that it's just hitting an enemy, which you will be doing with the beam rifle as standard. It will essentially give you just shy of 25% increase of firearm attack into that element, which is fantastic, because then that goes into everything. It double dips into your rolls again, so you will be doing more damage just from actually hitting enemies with this, and it doesn't really have a downtime. All you need to essentially do is just keep hitting an enemy, and it will last 30 seconds, I think it says. Yep, up to 5 stacks. And then essentially you just swap over and you just keep snowballing from there. So make sure you do match this up with the elements that you do want to be able to go for, so you can benefit from both sides. But I would highly recommend that you do actually grab one of the attribute rolls to really help you out. And lastly, the main thing that we can do is, because this is a firearm, we can talk about a few Descendants that really start cooking when it comes to this rifle. Obviously, you want to be able to go for just traditional standards, so Enzo is able to increase the amount of damage you can do from firearms. Fantastic place to start. Blair is also pretty good, because you can go into weak point damage, you can go into crit damage, a critical hit rate, so you can make it more consistent in terms of spreading all that damage out. Valby is also a fantastic one with supply moisture, so you can definitely go into that. But one that's recently just kind of like come onto the scene is actually one that I just kind of discovered when I was just messing about and trying to sort out my builds for my Sharon video. And that's actually going to be Ambush Sharon, which is fantastic. It really is such a good thing. Not only is it fantastic for skills, it's also fantastic for being able to go into your rifles as well, because how Ambush now, or active camouflage now, works is that while you are in camouflage, you essentially get your cooldowns and your movement speed and everything like that, and then once you do an attack, you will trigger Ambush, and this will give you an additional 22% to your critical hit rate. This is base, so it can be increased by the other mods that you do have on the gun, and on top of that, it also increases the outgoing damage by 100%. This then spreads out to other enemies as well, so it does really make her a decent firearm attacker as well. While it isn't as consistent, and you don't have as much uptime as like Enzo or Blair or anything like that, you can still put out such an amount of damage in such a short window with this, so I would recommend that you could actually probably give this a go if you are trying to level up your Sharon. Just keep in mind that obviously Ambushed is Ultimate Sharon exclusive, so if you are trying to level both up, this is probably one of the better guns to be able to slot in, and you can definitely really go in. In terms of like everything on this screen, you will be seeing more from the future video from the channel, but if you want to take a screenshot, that's currently what I'm working with. And with that, it pretty much wraps it up on the video for getting the most out of your Voltia beam rifle. Now, while you won't be rushing to use this in a Colossus setting anytime soon, the gun definitely holds up in all of the content Season 2 wants to throw at you, so make sure to build it up and build it right. But this is the section I want to hear from you. How are you finding Season 2 so far? Are you itching to complete the Battle Pass ASAP like I am? And lastly, who let Nexon cook so much with this new rifle and new Sharon setup? Let me know all that and more down below. Massive thank you for making your way to the end of the video, and as I always say, keep yourself safe, keep yourselves well, and see you all on the next video.